Hey guys, Sherry here. So glad you're joining me today to hear from an amazing planner, amazing strategic planner, strategic visionary. Her name is Brooke Richie-Babbage. Now, here's the thing. Brooke and I met on LinkedIn. We're one of those odd, I was kind of watching her, and I think it was the same way back, and we connected. And she's in New York, I'm in Chicago, and after our first call, we were like, when's our second call? I like you. We're speaking the same language. So we have stayed in touch for a while now and are working together. And it's been just this amazing. I'm trying to find a different word for marriage, but it's not a marriage, but it's an amazing partnership. That's the word I'm looking for. Of her really helping clients cast these strategic visions and plans, and then me helping them fund it. And it's kind of that simple. And so I want you to hear today, if you are looking for someone to help you set your strategic vision, establish your plan, she's your gal. Look no further. She's just has an amazing background. She's been in ED. She's been on the funder side. She's she's done everything. She's got a very fancy resume. If you see her bio in the show notes, she's got fancy degrees from fancy places like Harvard and Yale. And I've just enjoyed her fun that she's brought to all the relationships and all of our client interactions. But she's smart. You're really not going to get anybody better. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I'll let us take it from here. Brooke, thanks for being on my podcast.
Sherry, I'm so excited to be here with you. After years of talking offline, we get to bring our fun conversations online. So thank you for having
Yes.
me.
And if you're listening on the video version, we did not both plan to be in yellow V-neck sweaters. We did not plan to match, but here we are and bringing in the warm energy today.
That's right.
Okay, Brooke. So I just said a lot of fancy things about you in the intro, so people know a little bit about you. But I'd love to just hear how your background, how you've just this journey that you've taken, because I feel like that just makes you so magical that you've had all these different roles. Talk me through how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I've worn a lot of hats. I started my career as a community lawyer, social justice lawyer in New York City, baby attorney in my mid 20s, and loved doing that. And one of the things that I loved was social justice work, and that's been a through line through everything that I've done. I moved on from that to founding an organization that I ran officially for 10 years, but for those founders out there, you know that there's so many years before that. So for close to 15 years, I ran a nonprofit here in New York City. And after that, I stepped down as CEO about 5 years ago, and I support various institutions and leaders around the country launching and building and scaling social justice movements and nonprofits. So that has shown up with me being a coach. I am a professor of social innovation and nonprofit leadership, a graduate professor. I'm a writer. I teach various law schools around community lawyering. I just love all things having to do with building the frameworks for social change. So that's why I'm here.
Oh my gosh. Every time we have a conversation, you throw some nugget of well, yeah, and I'm a professor. I'm like, what? Oh, of course you are, is my answer. Of course you are. You're doing it all. Oh my gosh. Okay. So now I'd like to we're going to pause on that last part of what you said, or I guess dig in, not pause. Talk to me about your current business. I want to talk about I just think such 360 approach to this, like strategic, setting the strategic vision. And
Yeah.
you know how I deeply believe in your planning work. And
Yes.
and I say that to my listeners because our clients together who like have Brooke's plan and then I'm helping them fund their plans. It's really been this amazing thing that's attracting donors. And so tell me about your, like what you're doing now, the types of clients that come to you, um, and like what's that problem they're seeking to solve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the majority of the work that I do and have done really for the last 5 to 10 years is focused around the early stage growth that nonprofits go through. And you and I have talked offline about the sort of life cycles, the stages of development and growth of nonprofits. And I'm a total Virgo. I like to organize the universe of information into categories. So these stages of development really resonate with me. And most of the organizations that I work with are in the founding, infant, toddler, early stages, right? First 5 years, first $2 million. So they're small and they're growing very quickly. And what that means is that there is a lot of change all the time.
Yeah.
Every 6 months, they have a different team. Their board looks a little bit different. The challenges that they're facing have morphed. The questions that they need to ask themselves to stay ahead of the challenges have changed. Who they need to be as a leader has changed and evolved. So this early stage growth phase is a period of really rapid change. And most organizations, particularly those run by founders, are organic in their response to change, right? You have small teams, under 5 people. You sit down at a table, you're like, here's what we got to do. And you do that, and I'll do that.
Yeah.
And
Who's doing what? Yeah.
Let's do it, right? Let's get it done. And that works. And then you hit this sort of inflection point where you actually have to, if you're going to keep growing and going to be stable and have the impact you want to have, you have to be intentional. You have to start actually noting, wait, of the things we're doing, which are working and which aren't serving us and why. And that's where the plan comes in, right? That's where having an actual strategic plan, and you and I have talked about this, I do not mean the 20-page sort of,
bound doc. Yeah.
Bound document sitting on a shelf. It's overwhelming. And you're just like, it hurts my stomach to even look at it. And it also doesn't mean, and I think this is even more common, a really well thought out list of activities, right? Things that you want to accomplish. A strategic plan in a growth phase is really important because it allows you to say, we have limited resources that we have to allocate really smartly. We have tight capacity. We don't have all the people we need and the space we need. So we have to be really smart about where we're putting our time, our people, our energy, etc. Which means some things have to be taken off the table. We have to say no to some things. And what are those things? Yeah. And so as organizations go through these early stages and shift from sort of purely organic, going with the flow, to more intentionality, to more institutional, they have to deepen the strategic approach to growth.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, you've kind of helped me, usually my jumping off point is a strategic plan. Like, okay, you got your strategic plan. Now you need to fund it. Let's roll. You've kind of helped me put my head around, like I have seen a lot of those strategic plans that are like a list of 712 tasks we need to do in every single area. And it's like, and I'm a list maker. That probably is more my love language plan, but for you to say, I remember you articulating it to one of my clients that I was introducing you to, of really like saying, first, let's kind of go up a level. And I remember you using the phrase, like, we have to make sure we have your North Star. Yeah. And I just remember it because we were all like, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah. Talk to me about like that concept and how you lead people to that North Star.
Absolutely. It's so powerful. So Let me first share sort of how the absence of a North Star often shows up.
Yeah, good.
Right? So one of the most frequent challenges or complaints or sort of areas of friction that a lot of organizational leaders that I work with, and I'm certain you as well have, is getting their board to fundraise, right? This phrase, like, how do I get my board to fundraise?
I've never heard that.
We could have a whole other podcast about that. But when you look around and you feel like you have people on your board, on your team, in your world, who love what you do, say that they're committed, but aren't taking that next step, right? They aren't bringing in resources. They aren't connecting people. When you have people on your small but mighty team that knock on your door at least once a week with questions that actually are like about your vision, right? What do you want me to do here? Oh, this went wrong. How do you think I should proceed, right? They're not actually owning the work. These can have lots of sources, but a really common one is lack of clarity about either where they're going, what is the destination that we're all moving towards, and or why that destination. So going back to the example of the board, a North Star says to board members, yes, these are the activities we're going to do, right? These are the things we're going to do, right? That laundry list often.
Yeah.
But the reason we chose these 5 programs or these 6 partnerships and not these other 4 we could have is that we prioritize community participation and engagement, or we have a value of racial equity, or we have decided organizationally that infrastructure is of incredible importance to us over the next year, or we're building nationally. We have agreed on a set of narrow priorities through which all of our opportunities are filtered. So by the time a board member gets your plan and is sitting down, after lunch with a colleague, it isn't just that they're able to say, oh, let me tell you about this organization that does X, Y, and Z. What they're actually able to say is, I'm on the board of this organization, and for the next 3 years, we are really dedicated to building a network of community engagement in policymaking, right, in Atlanta. It's an organization that I coach with. That's something that's really important to us. Like, how do we help create space for community members to help shape the policies that impact us? That's what my organization does. Then they talk about the activities. Right? So the North Star is, why are we doing this thing? Right? What do these activities trickle up to? When your staff member understands the reason I am on the phone trying to make these strategic partnerships with schools around the state is so that we have a network of outreach partners to reach 10,000 kids in the next year. That's our North Star. So the role of the North Star is to create a container or an anchor, a lighthouse, right? If you're on this boat in the choppy waters of nonprofit, everything are chaotic, the lighthouse is that thing off in the distance that you're like, even as we are sort of doing our own thing, we know where we all want to land. We're clear about it. We're all headed in that direction. And it can be a gut check for us when we're getting off track. Yeah. And so if nothing else, your board is empowered to be out in the world saying, I may not remember all the talking points that Brooke said about our new programs and all the details that are super important to her, but sort of chaotic to me. But I know that North Star, and I can get excited about that.
I love that. You know what? As you're describing that, I'm wondering, like, what are you hearing? People coming out of 2020, like in 2021, 22, here we go to 23. Are you feeling like people are really saying, we had to kind of put our hands around this again, because like maybe things they were doing before are now obsolete or irrelevant, or, oh gosh, we were local and now we're national because everything went on Zoom? Or are you finding that North Star has changed, or maybe evolved is a better word, especially like these last few years?
That's a really interesting question. I would say I'm seeing 2 things. The first is that the organizations that, as part of their strategic planning process, say, did the work of clarifying a North Star and didn't go right to the activity planning. Yeah. They weathered these last 2 years better.
Mm.
Right? It was much easier to shift their team to working remotely. It was honestly easier to decide which programs they were going to pause, shut down, invest in. I am not at all saying that this was easy for any organization.
Sure.
But the North Star, the fact that everybody on the board and the staff and the volunteers and the advisors knew ultimately we want to be here in 5 years, meant that they could sit down and say, okay, nothing that we actually plan, none of the activities are viable. Can't do a thing that was in our actual work plan. But if that's still our North Star, if those are still our priorities, now what?
Yeah.
So it gave them a container. So that's the first thing I'm seeing. I think the second thing is with respect to whether the North Star itself is changing. Absolutely. I think there are a lot of organizations that are coming out and realizing what we thought our community needed, what we thought our constituents, clients needed, we have way more nuance. We understand the fissures in our society, the burdens that people are carrying better than we did before. And so you are seeing a resetting of priorities. And that makes sense. That's why, I always recommend doing a strategic plan every 3 years, not every 5 or 10 years, because it should be responsive,
Yeah. So can you walk me through your process then? I mean, what is that ideal? I mean, don't give away any of your trade secrets, but
no, I'm just like, well, it's like a 4-month process, but I'll,
I'm just curious, what is that process? Who's coming to you? Like, how is the board involved? Just to kind of give me some nuts and bolts of setting that North Star.
Yeah, absolutely. Of setting the North Star or crafting the plan?
Well, I suppose it's North Star then plan, right?
Yeah. So one thing that I always say about the kind of strategic planning process that I facilitate is it often catches boards in particular off guard. So I will have organizations, all of the organizations I work with are under 2 million, many are under 1 million. They're at this place where they absolutely need to have a plan that is a actual working guiding document, and they don't know how to do it. They've done a strategic plan. Many have done one, and it was frustrating, cost them money, took them time, right? It
didn't use it.
They didn't use it, absolutely. So they're coming to me, and the version of strategic planning that I offer is this takes no more than 5 months. It's actually closer to 4. We will meet between 4 and 6 times. Your board or your planning group, and sometimes those are different, right? Sometimes there's some people on a board, and you also have staff involvement, community involvement. And I have lots of frameworks for deciding who to involve in which phases, so it's not overwhelming. But whoever's stewarding this process, here are the 5 steps you're going to go through. They're well defined. You can do them in this number of meetings with this amount of time. And if you follow this framework, you will have 2 versions of a strategic plan at the end of 4 or 5 months. And that just depends on sort of people's schedules. 1, you will have a 1-page strategic plan. And I believe really strongly, if you cannot articulate your North Star, your core priorities, and your goals, just the destinations you want to arrive at in the next 3 years on a single page, either they are unclear or you have too many.
Love that.
Right? So you'll have a 1-page strategic plan that you can use as a fundraising document, as a marketing document, and you will have an internal operations plan that fleshes out the how. How will we get to these goals? That's where we talk about what are your activities? What are your strategies? What are the tasks? What are the resources we need? What's the budget, right? And you and I have talked about, I teach about anchor documents. Every organization needs 3 anchor documents, and you need to revisit them every year. You need a really solid strategic vision for the year, strategic plan for the year. That should be an outgrowth of your 3-year strategic plan. You should actually be able to see on paper how the 1 year relates to the 3 year. That needs to translate into a true cost budget, which is just telling the story of your plan in numbers. It is not based on your previous year. And I know you and I vibe about this all the time.
I'm like, this is why I love you right here.
Right? A good
Say it again.
A good budget is not an iteration on your last budget.
Yes.
It isn't, what can I do this for?
It's what you need. What do you need?
This is our vision, and this is the cost of that vision, because you will never fundraise it if you can't say it, even to yourself. And then the third anchor document, and this is where, this is your superpower, is how do we get it funded? What's the finance plan, right? So your strategic vision, the cost of that vision, and the plan for funding it. And so you'll have an operations plan at the end of this 4 months that leads to those. So when I say that to boards, they're just like, this, you can't do this in 4, like, that's not, what are you talking about? We have to have working groups, and we have to have community town hall meetings, and we have to have versions of 20 pages and a graphic designer. So once I sort of paint the picture of this vision for the planning process, with the clients that I do sort of the planning for them, I walk them through the stages, right? The North Star, setting your vision, is right at the front of that process, right? It's not the first thing you do, but it's the second. Yeah. And then from your North Star, what are your core pillars or priorities, areas of focus that create the boundaries for the last stage, which is your goals?
I love it.
End results. Yeah.
So
and I also have a set of processes that help people self-facilitate their own process.
That was my question. I was like, hold on, you gave us a little nugget, because you're doing these, but then you're also equipping people to facilitate this themselves if they want to, or budget requires, or whatever.
Yeah, I would say in the last year, probably 60% of the folks that have come to me thinking they needed to pay for an external strategic planner did not. And that's what I said. I said, actually, most organizations don't need an outside strategic planner, particularly, the organizations I work with, like I said, under 2 million. There are a few cases where you do, and way more often, you don't need one. Right. What you need is a really clear process that you can implement. And so that's what I offer.
I love that. Okay, so that one pager you mentioned, I keep, I'm just hearing that, and I want it for all my clients, because, I think strategic plans, not only are they running your organization, but I'm like, are you using that in fundraising? Are you using it to have these investment level conversations and attract major donors and attract the types of people who get it?
And if you aren't, you're leaving money on the table.
You're leaving money on the table. And I might even add, you're leaving 7 figures on the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that one pager is just so critical, because I do feel like, I was actually having this conversation today when I was talking about that cadence of major gift work being very different than newsletters and events. And
And it was versus transactional, which I've heard you map out for people brilliantly.
Yes. Oh my goodness! But the question was well, what am I doing in that meeting? What am I telling them? What am I, And it's we're actually having stakeholder conversations about everything we're talking about and involving them. And what a wonderful little Chi-Chi's not the word, but your donors have to know that one pager.
Yeah.
And I also, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's also really powerful because most executive directors are more in the weeds. They're in their own movies. So what we think as leaders, as development directors, what we are excited about will tend to be 6 levels below what a major donor actually cares about.
Yes.
Right. And so, when I first started doing major donor conversations, having them, I would sit down and I wanted to talk about the staff we'd hired and the new program we were rolling out, but it's going to be in these 3 cities. And definitely there were some major donors who cared, but what they actually would guide me towards, and I was very blessed to have amazing donor relationships, where we wound up was, where is this all going? Right. So these 3 partnerships are exciting, but to what end? How is that going to change Chicago? How is that going to change Detroit? What's the goal? What's the vision? They wanted to see the end and buy into and be excited about and be part of the end vision. How the sausage is made might be very thrilling to me because I love institution building and stuff. Assume it isn't to them unless they ask. And then you have those details. But that one page is a reminder for people having those conversations. Talk about the vision, bring them into the vision, bring them into the end goals. The one pager doesn't include a space for activities.
Right.
Not right. That's in the newsletter. Like, let them know the interns that you hired. That's fantastic and very important.
In the newsletter.
In the newsletter. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we see so much stuff that I'm like, that's irrelevant to donors. That's so important internally. It's completely irrelevant to donors.
Yep.
My approach is like, I want everybody's donors giving their best gift and then them giving that gift every year. That's my thing. I always say, is that their best gift? I don't know. Are they giving that gift every year? Like, that's what my clients hear me ask them. And I will tell you, we can get to best gifts sometimes, but the every year cadence is way stronger when there's a strategic plan in place.
That's right.
Because we have to, like, I'm not an executive director, but I'm coaching executive directors to say,
you're on the team.
I'm on the team. I do go into we sometimes. I'm like, wait, I mean you. I'll say, hey, I want you to paint the picture. In this case, the North Star. I want you to paint where we're going to be in 5 years and what's going to be happening and all the great things. But if we only talk out there, that's when you get the like, okay, well, like here, like it's like here's like $1,000, here's like $5,000. Yeah. But if we can say, and so this year we have a $1.7 million need. Could I walk you through that? Because next year it's going to be 2.2.
That's
and
right.
So when I'm like that one pager and the plan, of course, but like. Fundraisers have more control of that pacing and timing than they think if they have the plan to be able to articulate that and say, because next year we believe this is going to be happening.
Absolutely. And I think with it's interesting talking with leaders, again, so much of this comes down to how organizations have learned to budget, which, again, another podcast conversation. I think it does most organizations a disservice. But one of the most frequent conversations I have around exactly what you were talking about is they have their 3-year plan. They're really happy with it. And now we sit down to say, okay, year 1, right? Or let's say I'm working with them in year 2, right? Year 2, how do we translate the priorities and goals we've set out for the long term, for the 3 years, into what needs to happen in this next phase of the journey? And they come back to me and they say, this was amazing. And I sat down with a donor or a funder that says, okay, what's next? Right. We're in for this year.
Yeah.
And what else do you need? Where's this going?
I love it.
And the fact that they have this 1 year, they can answer the short term and they can say, and actually, because we have the 3-year plan, I can actually tell you what the next 2 years of this work looks like and costs.
Yeah.
So that relationship between the 3-year plan, the 1-year plan, and the rolling budget that reflects both the long and short-term vision is super important. It gives funders, it gives executive directors and development people a whole playground, right? A nice container that they can invite people into and see where do they want to fit inside this container.
Yeah. I always say that it's the saddest thing for me when an organization comes to me who spent tons of money on a strategic plan. I mean, and they should be an investment, but like a lot of money, and I say that because the weight was like, we spent all this on a strategic plan, but we don't have the money to do it, or we're just like still trying to figure out how to do it. Which goes back to the budget, which is what you were saying. Are you giving feedback on what needs to be in the budget, or are you in those conversations? Because I think for both of us, that budget is critical. It's where I start. Strategic plan. Do you have the need? Because I feel like that is actually that next step that actually keeps people from accomplishing their strategic plans.
100%. I think a strategic plan without a strategic true cost budget, it's going to be much harder to operationalize that plan. And so, in terms of the work that I do, So, we've talked about my strategic planning work. And as you know, I've run something called the Next Level Nonprofit Accelerator. And one of the reasons that I launched that program 2 years ago is because the bleed over, the relationship between strategic clarity, understanding the capacity that you need to achieve the goals you've set, and actually creating a plan and a financial infrastructure to bring in the capital that you need to achieve that goal. So many organizations think about those three things, right? Strategic clarity, capacity, which is all the people, your board, your team, your advisors, your network of people that you can leverage for capacity, and your capital, your fundraising and your finances. They think about those three things in totally separate silos, right? And you and I have talked about this. You have a budget cycle, a strategic planning cycle, and then you're off throughout the year doing hiring. And those are like three different things, but they aren't.
Yeah.
And so I started the accelerator so that I could have that holistic conversation with leaders about, okay, here's what's in your plan. This part's fuzzy. That doesn't mean anything to anyone but you.
Yeah.
So we're going to take it out of the plan or clarify it. Okay, so we do that work. Now we have a really good vision, a clear set of priorities, clear goals. I wanted to be able to then say, here's the next step. How do we get to that budget? And, one of the reasons that I love working with you is as organizations scale and grow, there are these inflection points they hit, right? So the first one's around 500K, then it's around 1,000, then around 2,000. You get around 2, 3, I don't mean 1,000, I mean million.
I know what you meant.
Right? You get around 2, 3 million, and you've heard me say this, what got you here isn't going to get you there, right? The habits that you've built around budgeting, around planning, around hiring, that worked for that first, say, million or 2 million.
Right.
Just, it's not even iterative. It's just a sea change. And what's exciting about the work that you do, and why I think you and I have always just like totally geeked out and connected, is once you have that clear vision and you have the natural next question, how do I get it funded? The answer to that at 3 million is fundamentally different than it is at 500,000. And so this next step that the journey you take people on that says you need that clarity, and now let's talk about building a finance engine, that's really exciting. And I think that's also a step that EDs and development people miss, that they still think at 3-4 million that it's make sure we say the right thing in our newsletter and have some really good wine and cheese parties and get the $90,000 check.
I feel you're hired as my marketing team. That's the step everybody skips. Like I said, we had the strategic plan, we made a budget, and then the next step is like, now just go grind harder, go send more LOIs, go, should we add an event? I feel like we jumps right through to just trying to dial up all the traditional fundraising activities when that's not the type of fundraising that's actually going to yield the new amounts of the new dollar amounts that we need.
That's right. And I think the three things are related. Like if you don't know the vision and aren't clear about the goal, you won't know that.
You won't know that. And so often I think there's hard moments where we're like, I don't think we have anybody on our team who actually does that type of fundraising. The very relationship, top of the pyramid. It's not events, it's not appeals, it's not campaigns. I was on a panel this week, and Michael Thatcher from Charity Navigator was on it. And I loved having him on there because I was like, oh, we're hearing straight from the horse's mouth on the investment that it takes an organization to grow. And it was a really interesting conversation. But I keep thinking from that, budgeting came up, of course.
Yes.
And that just like you're calling it, like we need an honest budget. And we can say, okay, fine, let's create an honest budget. That's the expense side of it. From the income side of it, does your team then know how to raise enough unrestricted revenues so you can have enough money for overhead, so you can do all the infrastructure things that your strategic plan requires? And so it's just so integrated, and I'm a strong believer in if you have grown, the 2 million to the 3 million scenario you're painting for us, it might be a significant investment, it doesn't have to be me, it could be anybody, to do we have people on our team who actually know how to do that type of fundraising? Yeah. It's a scary place to be, but like you said, what got you here is not going to get you over there. And it's a shift.
So it is. So I want to just lift up something that I think is like beneath the surface of what we're both saying that's just so important, I think, to name. Two things. One, just because it's scary doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. And two, honesty with ourselves. And those two things, I feel like every time an organization hits an inflection point, and when I say inflection point, I mean a moment where their organization has to shift how they've been led, how they're thinking about something, right? What gets you your first $500,000 is not going to get you your second $500,000, or at least not without you burning out, right? What gets you your first $1 million isn't going to get you to your next $5 million. Those inflection moments require an ability to say, it is totally scary to me that last year we predicted or projected a budget of $250,000, or more realistically, $800,000. And the actual true cost of this plan we have is 1.3 million, right? So for my organizations, because I'm working with smaller ones, that's a big jump for them. Yeah. And nobody wants to say that. I cannot tell you how many EDs I've talked to that literally say to me, I cannot go back to my board with a budget that says it's 1.3, to which I respond, it was always 1.3.
Yes.
It was 1.3 last year.
Yes.
The difference here is that you're being honest about how much you should be paying your staff, about you are not thinking, how much can we squeeze into $850,000? This is what it costs. And if you can't be honest, you cannot sit down with donors and funders. And when they say to you, what do you need? You're giving them the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Right? So that honesty is scary, and that's okay. That's okay.
Oh my gosh. You're speaking my language. I always say, if someone says, what do you need? And your answer is, well, we hope we would be at 1.5 and we're like thinking this, versus we have a 1.7 need. Could I walk you through it?
Yes.
Yes. Which one of those do you want to fund? I think I might hit it, and maybe I'll know what to do with your money, or let me tell you. Who wants to fund that? It's critical.
I always tell this story to the folks in my accelerator program because it was really transformational for me. I had a funder right when we hit our inflection moment and we're heading to our first $1 million. And he'd been a funder that had invested in me for years, first through his discretionary pot. And then once we hit the sort of size that his board needed us to hit, he was able to get us actual traditional funding and first 6-figure grant, just really great. And I had submitted a budget. This is like our 4th year getting money, and it was for a new program. And we had sort of partnered. He really wanted the foundation to be an early investor in this program. And he called me on Christmas Eve. And I remember being like, this feels inappropriate.
Gutsy and inappropriate.
Right? I'm like, but I'm with my family. And, that it's a different conversation for a different day. But actually, it was just an amazing, life-changing conversation, because what he called to say was, I have to submit all of the programs that I'm taking to the board for our budget on January 3rd. So this is the last opportunity I have to talk to you. And the budget you gave me is going to say one of two things to my board. Either you don't actually know what it costs to do what you want to do, or you do know and aren't fully behind the vision.
Oh,
and
God.
Basically, he's like, this budget doesn't match. It doesn't tell the same story as your narrative. He's mapped out this incredible strategic vision for the rollout of an amazing citywide program. And it was an amazing program. And this budget tells a different story. That was the first time.
Oh, my gosh.
And he said, I need you because I believe in this vision. I believe in this program. I need a real budget. And I need it by tomorrow. And I know it's Christmas Eve.
Merry Christmas.
This will be our last time. And honestly, if I submit this, there won't be a next time because the board is going to think you don't know what you're doing.
Oh, gosh.
And I know you do. So stop thinking like, and he said this to me, he said, I've been with you, you're a founder, I've been with you since early stages. Stop thinking like an early founder, scrappy, how much can I hustle together? What can I show you how much I can do this for? He's like, that is not a badge of honor. Stop it.
Yes.
Tell me what this costs. And if it's too big of a number, I will say that to you and we will find a middle ground. But your job is to tell me what your vision costs. And it added $900,000 to our budget.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
how I was, because we needed lawyers, we needed a team. And he came back and that was my first 3-year like 6 figures each year over 3 years. For us, that was a very big deal. It's what got us past our first million, right? What I remember about that was that lesson was that I was lucky enough to have a funder. And for so many people, the funders, the donors, they aren't going to say that. They are going to see the budget and think, she doesn't really believe in this. Like, I know that this doesn't cost $200,000. I don't know what it costs, but I know it's not $200,000. So does she know it's not $200,000? Like, I don't understand why these two things, the vision and the budget, are telling different stories. So I always share that with the folks at my accelerator because I was blessed to have a funder. And that's why it turned out to be okay. He called on Christmas Eve to say that. And so I try to say that to my folks in my accelerator program. Don't do that because it's not telling the story you think it's telling. It's not saying you're frugal and scrappy. It's saying you either don't know or you don't believe.
Yes. It's not helping anybody.
It's not helping anybody.
What a wonderful thing for him to call. I mean, we wish it was a different day, but like what a relationship you had with him that he could do that, which is awesome. If people want to find you, give me the rundown. I feel like everyone needs to speak to you. Like every time I talk to you, I'm like, everyone needs to talk to you.
Well, I tell you, I feel the same way about you. That's why I'm constantly being like, you have to call Sherry. Fundraising question, Sherry. Want to build your organization to 10 million? Sherry.
I'm here.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Give me take your time and walk through okay, if you're this person, you call me and I do this for you. You're this person, you call me out. Tell people where to find you. All of those things, take your time doing it because you change organizations. And I just love your partnership and your approach and I love how you phrase everything. It's like, I learn from you every time we speak.
Thank you. Right back at you. So, the easiest way to reach me is email, Brooke@BrookeRichie-Babbage.com. And there are 3 ways to work with me. The first is my Next Level Nonprofit Accelerator program. It's for organizations that are under $2 million, interested in growing, want to scale, want to do it in a sustainable, stable way. And it's a 6-month coaching and training program, high touch, high intensity, totally life-changing and transformational. It's actually just a really good program. That's the main way to work with me. I also do structured, self-facilitated strategic planning programs. So for organizations that don't want to pay the $50,000 for a strategic plan, don't want to or don't have it, but don't know how to do it on their own in a really effective way, I have a program that will guide you through that. And that's called self-facilitated strategic planning. And then the third way is I actually have a partnership with a mutual friend of ours, Ria Wong, and we have a program called Fund Your Strategic Vision. And it's for small organizations. So 1 million, really around the 1 million, $1.5 million mark, that want to shore up their strategic plan. So you may have a plan, you're like, actually, I just realized this is a laundry list of activities, that want to turn it into a fundable document and then lay out the framework for a fundraising engine that'll get you past that 7-figure mark.
Love it. Brooke, it's been awesome talking to you. Thanks for taking the time to have the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Always wonderful talking with you, Sherry.